I remember sitting at my desk one day thinking, is this what the next 30 years of my life is going to be like? I really was searching for a way to help people and do something more meaningful. Gut health is connected to mood and behavior, anxiety, depression. Yeah, like the quiet courage to stay on your path, even when everyone else is trying to distract from it.
Welcome to the Manceptional Podcast. This is your host, Ken Arcega. Today, I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Aron Choi, Dr. Aron Choi. He's a licensed naturopathic physician. A lot involved there: genomics, visceral manipulation, ketogenic diet, functional medicine. So we have a lot to talk about there. He's also a marathon runner and does Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So quite a lot of interesting things there. I'm interested today because aside from the medicine aspect, Aron went through a big change in his life. And that's somewhat what the Manceptional Podcast is about, is recognizing when you might be on the wrong track and how do you get yourself onto your right track. So I'm really looking forward to that. Aron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
So I was looking up kind of your past. I want to get into it a little bit. You're working in Silicon Valley at a startup, and we actually have an intersection when you're talking about your MySpace experience. Well, while you're sometime around the time where you were getting laid off, I was in the MySpace office in LA trying to sell them computer equipment. I've been in high tech sales, basically computers and the like. I was in a MySpace office meeting with the VP of technology, and we're in a meeting and all these people started standing up. We were in a conference room. We could look out through the glass window, and then people started walking by holding a box with their lamp in it.
Oh my God.
And people were crying, and I said, "Oh, this is not good. I'm not going to sell anything here." But that was about the same time when they were going down and they were doing all the layoffs. So, it's 1 degree of separation in a way.
So you saw it happen. Yeah, you probably.
Oh my God!
That was 2009, July. I remember it was a summertime, and just seeing people get up and walk away, getting called away from their desk. And I was sitting there, it's going to be me next. I've been here for 6 months, and things aren't looking good for the company as a whole. Yeah. So that's our little intersection. It's funny how it's crazy.
That coin. So in high school, did you have any inklings about what you're doing now? Or, it sounded like you're kind of like me. I kind of fell into sales and, I didn't have much of a path. I had some good times. I made some good money. That's the problem with sales. You make good money. You get hooked on the money. But, there come some hard times where you hit the wall and you go like, what am I doing? Did you have any inkling when you were growing up or in high school, college? Like, when did the inklings start, or was it only after you had already started working and then it hit you?
Yeah, the inkling, I guess you're referring to like inklings about where I am now, like as a naturopathic doctor.
Exactly.
No, I had no idea I would be in medicine. I had no interest in being a doctor or a healthcare practitioner. My mom's a pharmacist, so I've always been health conscious. Mm-hmm. But really in high school, I don't think I really had any clear direction about where I wanted to go. I was always like a pretty decent student. I was a good student, which I think is probably one of my strengths in that setting. But it also, in hindsight, trained me to just be a direction follower.
Yes.
Like I would kind of go through the motions, get decent grades, I played tennis and I did decently enough. It was a lot of mediocrity. Yeah. And it didn't really have, it didn't really come from a place of inspiration. Like I always admired people like Michael Jordan, right? He's like, that guy is always he's so clear about what he wants. I don't really know what I want. So for a long time, I've been trying to, it's like this question of like, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, is this all that there is to life? And my first job before MySpace at the search engine marketing startup, I remember sitting at my desk one day thinking, is this what the next 30 years of my life is going to be like? Like meetings, sitting in front of a computer, looking at Excel, doing this stuff. So
I've had plenty of those moments, and I think the listeners probably have that same moment for themselves.
Yeah. So the inkling came around that time, and it really kicked me in the face when I was asked to get up from my desk at MySpace and carry my box of stuff to a room where they dialed me into a HR person somewhere across the country to lay me off. It wasn't even the person who called me away from my desk to speak to me in person. It felt like such a inhumane way to lay someone off.
Yeah.
But those are wake up calls.
But you were saying in one of your presentations you were giving that you can't sit around and wait for other people to give you stuff. Like when you get a job, you're kind of dependent upon them to dictate what you're going to do for your job. When you get laid off like that, you realize there's nobody that has my back. I mean, it's really incumbent upon myself to, pick myself up and do something, not waiting for a company or what have you to have your life secure or whatever.
Yeah. I learned at that moment, security is really an illusion. A steady job, a steady paycheck, they feel safe, but it's actually no different. That can change in a day, as it did to me twice. I got laid off twice in 6 months. And I was like, okay, I need to start taking control of my life.
And the company I was at, which I had been at for a while when I was at MySpace selling the computer blades, actually went out of business soon after that as well. Not because of MySpace, but just in general for other reasons. So
yeah, it was 2007, 2008.
Yeah. Unlike you, when you made this change, which I want to talk about, I kept on with the sales career, jumping off to different companies. And, I'm coming back around now to getting myself, aligned, should I say. But back to you. You're making me think of all these things now. So I wanted to ask you, so you had mentioned that you'd seen your grandparents going through kind of end of life, quality of life, healthcare, and you saw that the system maybe wasn't right. And then your mom, I think, introduced you to homeopathic type of medicine, or was it naturopathic?
Naturopathic. Yeah.
Okay. And, so when you're looking at that and you have interest, still you've got a big hurdle in front of you. Like, I have to go to medical school now, or like, what? This my little subtitle, do hard work. That's not an easy thing to, first of all, not jump into another similar job you were doing. You're going to do something totally different, and it's not easy, right?
No.
Being a doctor is not easy. So what was your thought process at that time, or did you just not think about it? You were just, I'm doing this.
Yeah, I got to go back now. Now it's like 9 years ago, and that's the funny thing. Time kind of goes by regardless of whether you do it or you don't.
Right.
And I know I had the support of my girlfriend at the time, who was going to physical therapy school, and she was like looking through the prereqs. I didn't know what prerequisites were. It's like, oh, you've taken these classes, and you only need this many more. So taking a few more classes will get you on the track to do the pre-med thing. And really, I really was searching for a way to help people and do something more meaningful, because the work I had been doing, I just didn't care that much. It was interesting, but I didn't feel any real passion for it. Like, there was no meaning behind it for me. That might have been different for other people, but I was looking for more meaning. Like, how can I make myself more valuable? And like you said, around that time, it was also a wake-up call when my grandmothers were in the hospital, and I didn't understand what the doctors were saying. I knew they were on tons of medications, but there was still, the quality of life wasn't being addressed. And that was like, why are people suffering when there's this gap in the medical system that's definitely not being served? And my idea, I saw naturopathic medicine treating people as a whole, looking at things through a health perspective rather than a disease management perspective made a lot of sense to me. So I wanted to be able to help in that way. So when that mission was clear, I guess you kind of jump in and you just start doing the work.
Right. I guess if you have that mission, then, going to go through pre-med and doing all that stuff, but that's just stuff you do, stuff you overcome. But if you've got the passion inside you, you're not thinking about the hard work. You just get it done because you've got a purpose, right?
Exactly.
Easier to have a purpose.
Yeah. It's like that goal, that purpose, that clear destination is like pulling you through the crap that you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like running a marathon. Very much like running a marathon. It's like the goal is clear. I need to run 26.2 without dying, getting injured. And, I want to hit a reasonably decent time. So, I have to start training in order to reach that. So that's why, if the goal is clear, the path to get there is often also kind of, it gets laid out in front of you, and you just have to do it.
There was Think Big, I think was something you were giving a presentation at, and you had a quote on there. I don't know if you put that on there or someone else did, but it said, if you do not change direction, you may end up where you're heading by Lao Tzu. Was that something you put in there? Or was
yeah. I found, I don't know where, was it? Maybe I read a lot of books, so maybe it was like Essentialism, or maybe one of Ryan Holiday's books. And so I like quotes because they're reminders that, for one, people have kind of figured out a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why not draw from the wisdom of those who have been there and done it?
Yeah, that's scary to me. And when I read that, you just may end up where you're heading. Like, holy crap. That's scary if you're on the wrong path. You might just get there.
Yeah, and if you don't have a path, you'll just kind of end up kind of with that somewhere, but you might not actually like where that somewhere is.
Right. Oh my gosh. So the naturopathic, help me to say that correctly, because I'm used to homeopathic, naturopathic?
Naturopathic. So you'll hear people say naturopathic.
Yeah. So I have a problem generally with how I see medicine these days, especially what they're doing to kids, where they prescribe, for Adderall, all the stuff for ADD. I think our culture, the Western culture, is just nuts with all this stuff. Also, I have a daughter who got some shots for something that she shouldn't have gotten. I went against my better judgment and gave her seizures. And so I'm very, very, I know there's some good medicine and some good things, but I'm also very skeptical about all this stuff that's getting pushed on people. I also know someone who works for a psychiatrist, and someone will just walk in the door. Oh, this, that, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And it's medication. I just don't think it's right. So could you tell us a little bit about naturopathic, the whole body concept? I want to get into the visceral manipulation. I didn't know about that. It's kind of interesting. But maybe you could just give us an overview of what this is. Could help us to understand.
Sure. And maybe I'll use an example from my life. Around that time I was getting laid off. I was also really stressed out. And for the first time in my life, I had migraines and developed eczema. Eczema is those dry, scaly patches on your skin. I woke up one morning and was like, what the hell is this on my nose and my neck? And people were like asking me, did you get a hickey? I was like, no, I don't know what this is. So I didn't know anything about, what I knew about medicine was to go to my primary care doctor. So I went to my doctor, really nice guy. But he looked at my skin. He's like, yeah, this looks like, the technical term is atopic dermatitis. And I was like, why is this happening? He's like, might be an allergy. No one really knows, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And he walked away and came back with two steroid creams.
Oh, God.
And he's like, okay, yeah, put these on. And I asked him, so how long do I have to use this for? Off and on, probably the rest of your life. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem to make sense if this is actually addressing the thing that it needs to be addressed. Wouldn't it resolve? So, but I was a good patient. I wanted to go away. So I started applying the cream and it did go away. But then once I stopped, it would come back. And this cycle kind of continued.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I was in naturopathic medical school and I was seeing my own naturopath where we started addressing things like, how's my digestion? How's my stress? What's the stat? Am I eating foods that I'm intolerant to that are irritating my nervous system? Right. So that's an illustration of maybe a whole body approach versus a disease focused approach. That naturopathic medicine is looking at a few layers down. What is contributing to the symptom? The symptom is a sign that something underlying is not being addressed. So the symptom is not the issue. Like the eczema isn't the thing that needs to go away. It's how do I create the right environment in my body and my mind that creates, that helps the body self-regulate, right? Symptoms are a message from the body that are telling you that we need to fix something or else it's going to get worse.
So what I thought was interesting is like that emotions or your mind, what you think and emotions can affect your organs and your system. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Like, oh, you're upset and your stomach feels upset. But I mean, it could cause you eczema. It could cause a lot of things because of your emotions. How does that work? Like, how does it manifest from how you're feeling or what you're thinking into the organs and all these weird things happening?
Yeah. I mean, let's think about it. Like, have you ever been pulled over by a cop on the freeway? Mm-hmm. Like, what happens when you remember that moment when you see the flashing lights behind you and over the loudspeaker, pull over to the right on the shoulder, blah, blah, blah. Like for me, I've been pulled over on the 5, right? Driving down to LA, just kind of mindlessly driving. I was like, oh crap. Like my hands get a little clammy. Yeah. You get it. Yeah, exactly. So that is just a quick illustration that your mind does change your physiology in your body. It changes your biochemistry. So imagine that feeling, that being in that state constantly. Mm-hmm. That is when health problems can kind of arise. That's when the eczema can show up. That's when blood pressure stays high. That's when your hormones get out of whack. That's when you start having immune function, like dysfunction. You start getting colds all the time. So, our mind, what's in our head. I hate it when people say it's all in your head. What's inside this head? It's your brain. What's your brain controls everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you say
that's just an illustration of how it works?
So that's a good point. So what do you have like a gut feeling of how much an environment in today's society, let's say working, especially people in cities, let's say that's very stressful. You always hear about stockbrokers, they're all on medication. They all die young from heart attack, stress or what have you. What do you think, what percentage of health problems do you think could be addressable through naturopathic or at least, or maybe a psychologist even, versus all the medication we're giving to cover the symptoms?
Yeah. And I'll start by saying with naturopathic medicine, there's for me at least, I'm not anti-intervention, anti-surgery, anti-pharmaceutical, anti-whatever. It's really about using the right tool at the right time. And there's a hierarchy we call it the therapeutic order, imagine a pyramid. At the bottom is how do you create the conditions to be healthy? That's your lifestyle. That's your sleep. That's your environment. And moving up, we think of more intense interventions like supplements, then medications, then physical, like manual therapy, creating the right structure. And then at the top are the more kind of the riskier interventions, pharmaceuticals and surgery. So let's just start with that. And so when I think of how does our environment affect our health, that's really the foundation. Everything, I forget who said it, but our environment is everything that isn't us.
That's a good way.
And we can argue that our gastrointestinal tract, right, the bacteria in our gastrointestinal tract aren't actually part of us. It's part of our environment. And we know that the microbiome affects our immune function, how we digest our food, our mood, the serotonin we produce to help us feel happy and balanced, and is all created in our gut. And that's all outside of us, really. Mm-hmm. So our environment is, I think, more important than we can ever really imagine. I don't know percentage wise, at least for chronic diseases, the top chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, cancers, a lot of them are have modifiable risk factors, meaning you can reduce your risk significantly by paying attention to your environment, the foods you eat, how you think, the people you're around, the quality of the water you're drinking. Are you eating food that's crap, or are you eating whole foods, right? Those are all environment. So it's critical.
But the emotional aspect, does that put you in the realm of being a little bit of a psychologist when people come in? Like if you can tell they're depressed about because things in their life or whatever, maybe they need a life change like you went through.
Yeah.
That's do you get into that area at all? Or it's not really, or you do?
I mean, definitely where it's necessary. I'm not a counselor, but I have counseling training. And a lot of the naturopathic approach is understanding the individual in front of me. Like, what's their story? What was, we'll ask questions about someone's childhood. Was there any trauma there? A lot of people who have chronic illnesses also have, have some type of trauma, whether it's emotional or physical or, sexual abuse. It comes up. And there's a book that covers this entire topic about emotional trauma and chronic disease. It's called "The Body Keeps a Score" by medical doctor Bessel van der Kolk, and it shows the connection between emotional stressors, PTSD in war veterans, and how they have chronic diseases. Like children who grow up in really bad, abusive environments tend to have more diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer. Mm-hmm. So the emotional things are not separate from the physical.
So it doesn't seem like the regular, straightforward medicine that's only treating the symptoms will ever really solve the problem. Like you said, it's not addressing the cause, the internal cause, or the whole picture. It's just the symptoms.
Exactly. Yeah. And, it's great, heroic, I call it like heroic medicine, right? If I'm in a car accident and I'm bleeding and my leg is broken, I want to go to the emergency room. Mm-hmm. But if I have high blood pressure, a heroic intervention most of the time is not going to solve the issue.
Right.
So then we have to look at the other factors.
I have a friend that had high blood pressure, and he solved it. He started taking some of those medications that you see the commercials for on TV, but he more about his personal self and a little bit of psychology was able to get rid of the high blood pressure. Like without that stuff, he doesn't take that stuff anymore.
Yeah.
So I know it's possible.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I have a friend who's a physical therapist, like a smart guy, but really kind of overly analytical sometimes. Mm-hmm. And he texted me, he got into a car accident and had to take a few days off of work. He's a really busy physical therapy practice. And he texted me, he's like, oh my God. Like I noticed that when I don't overwork and I'm sleeping at a normal time, I feel more relaxed. My blood pressure has normalized. I was like,
there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So what do you think about supplements then? That's not medicine per se, but like I drink, we can get into the keto thing too. I've been drinking bulletproof coffee for about 3 years now and do some intermittent fasting with keto a little bit. I'm not perfect at it. Mm-hmm. But what do you think about supplements? You read things where they're totally useless, and then you read things where it helps with this and that. Do you have any kind of medical thought on that?
Yeah. Supplements again come after the foundational things, right? If you're eating like crap, you can't out supplement a crappy diet. You can't out supplement a not exercising or stress. But then, there are times when you need supplementation. So someone who's severely deficient in amino acids, for example, might need supplementation. So it's really being clear about what you're trying to achieve with the supplement, and not thinking that it's a one size fits all. It's almost the same mentality in using pharmaceuticals, like throwing a pill at something to see if it goes away. You can do the same thing with supplements.
Right. Okay. But so for your marathon training, do you take any additional supplements other than just your diet?
For marathon training, I would supplement things like electrolytes, things to help with hydration, maybe some extra magnesium, because magnesium is like a really important cofactor for all the other biochemistry to work. Or I like herbal medicine, so different teas to support my adrenals, right? The organs that produce the stress hormones.
So you're saying tea?
Yeah, like different teas.
Okay. Yeah. So I listening to Tim Ferriss, and you had mentioned you had read his book, The 4 Hour Work Week, but I just bought this reishi tea.
Mm-hmm. The mushroom reishi? Yeah.
Yeah. Is that, I just bought it because you said it's great. It helps you sleep. I don't really have problems sleeping. I've tried it, but I slept fine after drinking it, but I usually sleep okay anyway. Like, what's your thought on that? You're mentioning teas.
Yeah, teas. When it comes to herbs are plants. Herbs can be food, right? Dandelion, or what's one that I really like? Burdock root is really great for the liver. These have been used in. Burdock roots have been used in like soups. Ginseng, right, is another root. Ginger, black pepper, those are considered botanicals, and a lot of them can be used as food. But they also have these other properties. And mushrooms are kind of amazing for their ability to improve immune function, and there's roles in their treatment for cancer. So I think of the botanicals a little bit different than supplements, something that comes in a capsule.
Right. Okay. I see. So speaking of this, then what about all this marijuana stuff that's out now? I'm going to be interviewing someone that has a business. He's got CBD oil based stuff, which is different than the marijuana stuff. But so marijuana, is that a botanical?
Yeah, it is. It is a botanical, right? There are also herbs that are low dose herbs that are dangerous in high amounts. So again, it comes down to understanding what you're trying to achieve with that specific plant. And with marijuana, I won't say I'm like super. My expertise in that area isn't huge, but from what I understand, cannabinoid CBD oil, that's the non-hallucinogenic part. Right. And there's benefits for autoimmune disease, pain, inflammation. So I'm not opposed to it. I think there's a lot of value in marijuana with the right application.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think it's an evil thing.
Yeah.
I think people are figuring it out with the legalization of marijuana. I know in the past doctors have lost their licenses for prescribing, but it's more the perception that marijuana is evil or a drug or a recreational drug. Right. So I think there's a lot of political stuff, like baggage that comes along with some of these.
Well, there's really two sides of it, right? The CBD is a different strain of the plant, or it's a
different constituent.
Doesn't have so much of the other stuff in it. So it's really different than smoking, you would think of smoking pot, and the oil part's different. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So kind of moving over to the diet aspect, you're big on the ketogenic. As I mentioned, I do it to an extent. What's your, you partnered with someone, was it Chef Heidi, I think you said? Yeah. What are you doing there, or what's your take on the ketogenic diet? I'd be curious. And what are you doing in that aspect with that partner you have?
Well, yeah, my thought on the ketogenic diet is evolving. It's not, I think you can approach the ketogenic diet in different ways, right? Ketogenic, maybe in the mainstream, might mean I get to eat lots of fat and butter and dairy and cheese. in my mind, the ketogenic diet, the purpose of the ketogenic diet is really to change the biochemical state of the body so that, often the benefit says that we're able to use fat as fuel, but it's more than that, right? We are, as humans, we're meant to not just be eating all the time. And a ketogenic state just means your body's making more of these ketones, this alternate source of fuel. And there happen to be health benefits to this state. Better immune function, lower stress, lower inflammation. When it comes down to it, a good diet is eating whole foods in balance, drink of good quality. So I'm not a big fan of diets in general, because I've seen a lot of patients when they're given this plan, this diet, they overthink what they're eating. They overanalyze. They become too restrictive. So a ketogenic diet is another tool. It's not a cure-all. People can my skin got worse on a ketogenic diet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I know now when you're eating a lot of fat, I was eating good quality fats, coconut oil, avocado oil. Yeah. Let's say your gut is not in balance. There's maybe bacteria that's producing endotoxin, and you absorb more of those endotoxins when you have higher fat. So if someone is dealing with gut issues, getting on a ketogenic diet is not really the best first step.
How would you solve that? Like, is that probiotics, the gut stuff, or is it very specific to everyone's specific body?
Yeah, it depends what's going on. It's probably taking a step back and addressing gut health. So for one, is there some underlying bacterial overgrowth or yeast overgrowth? There's something called increased gut permeability, leaky gut, right? If we think of, if your gut's inflamed and normally, like if we think of the gut lining as this filter, if it's inflamed, the gaps are bigger, and proteins and things that are not that are viewed as threats by your immune system get activated. So you want to make sure that your gut is healthy and you can actually absorb the right things and keep the right things out before throwing a ton of fats into your diet.
Wait, you said protein is seen as a negative thing, a bad thing to your body?
Proteins. So proteins is really a class of a molecule.
Okay.
So, protein, we think of proteins are basically any structure made from amino acids. Okay. So if they're too big or too large, or if there's a certain shape to these proteins that your body's like, that looks like an invader, it can turn on your immune system, activate your alarm system.
What would you eat that's a protein amino acid that your body would think is an invader? That's like wheat. Is it not the wheat, the whey protein, or what's a protein that your body would get amped up for against?
Well, different types, like gluten is a protein. So things that are not digestible or recognized as a body as food or nutrients can activate an immune response.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm aware of the gluten thing. We had to get rid of gluten because of my daughter. She was allergic to it. Would get inflamed. So, but I didn't realize it was a protein.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Now that we're in the gut, you specialize in GERD, right? The gastrointestinal, I guess when your
reflux
into your esophagus or something.
Yeah, that's GERD is the reflux, the acid reflux, and often one of the causes is a hiatal hernia, where your stomach is being pushed up into your chest. Jeez. And acid. So normally, stomach acid stays in your stomach, and your GI tract is a one-way road, right? You eat food, and it should go in through the clean hole, out through the dirty hole.
Right.
But with acid reflux, that gastric juice that helps you digest your food is coming up into your chest, and you're feeling heartburn. You get sore throats. The regurgitation.
Why is your stomach coming up into your? Why is it doing that?
Yeah, there's a few possible reasons, right? The most common explanation is there's a muscular ring called the lower esophageal sphincter, right? If you imagine your esophagus from your throat down to your stomach, there's a muscular ring that keeps food in your stomach when you're digesting it, and the acid and all that stuff contained. So when there's a compromise in that muscular ring, right, there's common triggers: chocolate, coffee.
Wait,
mints, spicy
chocolate
food
would give you a problem?
Chocolate, it triggers. It's a common trigger.
Oh, I guess I don't have foods. I eat a lot of chocolates, and I don't have that. So hopefully that means I'm not allergic to that. Wait, the chocolate it affects that little ring, not your stomach coming up.
Yes, yeah, that ring. So the hiatal hernia, the stomach coming up, compromises that ring as well.
Okay.
So it's actually more complex than a lot of people realize. What we experience as acid reflux could be a problem with not digesting your food completely, eating foods that you can't digest well. Maybe it's gluten, maybe it's wheat, maybe it's dairy. If we think of our bodies, especially our thorax, our chest, and our abdomen as pressure containers, there's a pressure balance between the two. In our chest, we have like a negative pressure. In our abdomen, we have a positive pressure. So naturally, there's more pressure in our abdomen, but normally it balances out. But let's say you have gas and bloating all the time, which is a sign of poor digestion, eating foods that don't sit well with you. You're increasing pressure upwards. And let's say you sit all day. Maybe you have 10 to 15 extra pounds of visceral fat in your abdomen, which is causing more pressure. Your pants are tight. That's more pressure. So there's a lot of factors that are kind of disrupting the balance in your body.
And that will force your abdomen up.
Yeah. And the stomach, and that's a kind of a weak spot, kind of a vulnerability where things can herniate.
So what about all those commercials you see on TV for acid reflux? What is that medication doing?
Commonly like a Tums or a Omeprazole with proton pump acid blockers. Yeah. That's again treating the symptom of the acid coming up.
Okay.
The thinking conventionally is, stomach acid is coming up into your chest and causing it to burn. What do? You neutralize the acid, or you decrease acid production. But what's the problem with that? We need stomach acid, one, to help digest our food, to activate all the other enzymes that help us absorb our food. 3, acid also prevents harmful bacteria from growing and entering the rest of our digestive tract. So you can imagine.
So if you're neutralizing it, then all the things that it's supposed to do in your stomach, it's not doing it as well. So then you get all those other problems.
Exactly, which is what we see a lot of these days. If you look at the box on like the instructions say don't use it for more than like a week or 2 weeks. And I've had patients come in who have been on it for 8 years, 10 years.
Oh my God.
You can't absorb your B vitamins, B12 without stomach acid. You need B12 for so many different things. So you're not absorbing your minerals. So then what happens? Like maybe you start having like bone density issues, malabsorption.
Oh my God. Now, this is a little bit of a tangent, but a lot of these medications, a lot of them I think are maybe for depression, but all of them that you see on TV, they always say that the side effects could be depression, thoughts of suicide, all that. Why is that? I don't know if acid reflux particularly does that, but a lot of these things you see in the commercials, they spend half the time talking real fast about how you're going to have all these problems and you're going to die.
Yeah, that makes me worried when I hear that.
Yeah.
Like, isn't something wrong if one of the side effects is possible death? And
thoughts of suicide and I have indigestion,
I mean, often, if we think of how we're all connected, right? What do you do with these nutrients? You're building your neurotransmitters, right? The serotonin, dopamine, things that make you feel balanced and good. Gut health is connected to mood and behavior, anxiety, depression. So so gut health
If your bacteria and all that stuff's not in balance there, how would that lead to depression? I mean, I think it would lead to you not feeling good because your stomach doesn't feel good. You're not getting nutrition, but how does that link to depression?
So the serotonin, this neurotransmitter, 90% is made in your digestive tract. Serotonin gets converted to dopamine. Dopamine is that pleasure neurotransmitter. Mm-hmm. So if you're not able to produce enough serotonin, well, that's going to affect your brain. There's a whole gut-brain axis connection between your gut and your brain. There's a whole separate, what we call it the second brain, the enteric nervous system, which is located around your gut, sensing what's coming in and going out. So when you say, trust your gut, you feel like you're punched in the gut. Those are all
they're actually true.
Sayings. Yeah, those cliches, those sayings, they tell us that our gut tells us something and affects how we think and feel. So, sometimes depression and anxiety isn't all just a cognitive thing. Maybe you sometimes just can't think your way out of depression or feeling crappy.
So that kind of goes into it's not really psychology, but if somebody comes into you and, they look kind of mopey and depressed and you can tell they're kind of depressed. So do you automatically start thinking about the gut and all that at that point? I've definitely learned to think that way because I've had patients who came to me for visceral manipulation, and they would tell me, "Oh, I have the seasonal affective disorder. I feel, you feel sad during the winter when it's cloudy here in Seattle." And after running some tests, we found, there's signs that there could be a yeast overgrowth. This patient I was seeing was on an antidepressant for 10, 20 years. Jeez.
And I was like, okay, I talked to my mentor and we're like, why don't we treat this yeast thing and this gut yeast overgrowth thing and see what happens. And within a month, she was like, I got off my antidepressant. I went to my psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You don't need this antidepressant anymore. And
that sounds
like,
amazing.
Holy crap.
That sounds amazing to me. So how can you change, or is one of your goals, I'm just asking, is to change the public perception, or how can you change the public perception and kind of the whole pharma economic structure that's been built around giving medications when it could actually be something entirely different, like you're treating yeast overgrowth instead of being on depression medicine for 20 years, right? I mean, that's kind of mind-boggling. It's probably tens of millions of people this could affect, and nobody knows about it.
Yeah, I mean, luckily there are more and more doctors from all different backgrounds. I've met cardiologists who've had changed the way they think. I met a cardiologist who he was telling me at a conference, he's like, I started following the advice I was giving my patients to eat low fat or whatever the conventional idea is, and he's like, I got sicker. He's like, he followed his own advice and got sicker. And so now he's doing more the looking at things in a holistic way. And so doctors, patients are realizing that there's more to the story than the medication.
Right.
And it's a matter of doing podcasts like this and sharing it and telling people and helping people experience what it feels like to address their whole person. Right. And be like, oh, I do feel better. It's like my friend taking a few days off and saying, oh my God, my blood pressure it decreased and I feel better. So it's helping people experience it for themselves. I can't convince, I experience it for myself. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right.
So it's really
maybe you got to go on getting it out to people, and maybe you can't change the system with a frontal assault, but maybe changing people through culture will kind of move things in that direction.
Yeah, and I think frontal assaults tend to have bad reactions. So I don't claim to be I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to tell people what I believe and do it as safely and responsibly as possible. And I have to practice my truth and practice what I preach.
Yeah.
That's kind of what my kind of ethos is. Practice what I preach and share.
I want to get to your podcast, because I think that's getting to the realm that you're just talking about. But before we do that, quickly, the visceral manipulation. Could you tell us what that is and what you actually do?
Visceral manipulation, what I actually do.
The
way I just, so if we think of it, it's a manual therapy. It's a system of manual therapy, using my hands and using specific techniques to change the tissue quality of the organs of the body, the blood vessels and nerves, to help them function better. It comes from an osteopathic approach and the whole theory is when your organs move freely, they function better.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, how would they? Yeah. So how would they? So I know there's membranes and stuff that kind of hold things in place.
Yeah, fascia, soft tissue.
Fascia. So are you saying those things get blocked, and so your organs aren't jiggling around like they're supposed to? Or what? I'm not obviously I'm not a doctor, but you know what I mean. Like, how does it get blocked? Like scar tissue, or what do you?
Yeah, that's part of it. Well, let's take a step back and talk about fascia. Okay. If we think of our bodies, we are really one unit. We're not separate parts. We talk about separate parts in anatomy. We name muscles, we name structures because it helps us think of the body and provide a map. But really, if we look at it, all the research that's out there now is showing that we have one connective sheet from head to toe surrounding every muscle, every blood vessel, every artery, every organ. And it's not just a structural kind of mechanism, but it's also a way that our body senses where we are in space. It senses movement.
Is it electrical?
Yep. If we think the nervous system, it operates on electrical impulses.
Right. But the fascia, the connective tissue, does it have its own communication?
Yes,
thing?
It does. So it helps you sense where you are in space. It can sense threat. It has blood flow to it. So I think what people can often relate to is thinking of like a tight muscle, right? The fascia. Why do people foam roll and stretch?
Right.
You're changing the tissue quality of that fascia.
Okay, and I have a foam roller. Okay, so I get it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the tissue quality around your organs is no different. So often, if you get in a car accident, someone who's experienced whiplash, right? Your brain can experience whiplash. So can your organs, right? So you can sprain ligaments around your liver. And that will tighten things up, and that can change how you move. It can change the function, the blood flow to that organ. And so
that makes total sense.
Yeah, just like you would use manual therapy to change the tissue quality of a tight muscle, you can change the tissue quality around the organs. And so, like, structurally, that's one of the things I would do for hiatal hernias, right? The stomach there's a restriction around the stomach that's might be causing it to kind of be moving up into your chest. Okay. And how, a pill is not going to change that. You need to address the structure.
So I'm still not understanding, how would you, so you go in and you're giving a massage on the stomach? Like how do some of that stuff is internal. So I don't understand how you would get to that. You don't have to give a medical
sure.
dissertation here, but I'm just curious. I don't understand how you would get in to affect the tissues in your internal organs that's inside. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I would use my hands, and someone had described it as, you do non-surgical surgery. It's like, oh, interesting. So I'm using specific hand placements around the stomach to feel and to change the tissue quality. It's kind of like a massage, but I like this. It's a little bit more specific.
Mm-hmm. If I blindfolded you and you just put your hand on someone's stomach, and could you actually feel some stuff, or do you have to understand the symptoms first, kind of where to look?
Oh, no, I definitely can feel the difference in the quality of the tissues. And, that comes from practice. Our hands are one of the most sensitive parts of our body outside of our like face, lips, and tongue. But I'm not going to use my face, lips, and tongue to treat a patient. So
hopefully not. I'm going to see you. I'll be doing the next one from jail.
Yeah. I can't put that in a consent form. And so, using, the man who, Jean-Pierre Barral, the man who can develop the system, noticed just by experience that he could feel the changes in the tissue quality around the lungs in patients who had lung disease. So he started putting two and two together. It's like, I can feel this, and they have something going on there. And, when they were alive, I was treating them. And then now that they've passed away and we're able to do, this center in France they were able to do autopsies. So he's like, oh, that's what I was feeling. Wow. So manual therapists can tell just from experience when something feels tight or immobile, the quality doesn't feel as healthy. So it's using touch.
Could you give us an example of someone that has a symptom of some sort? Well, I guess the GERD would be one, right?
That'd be one.
Are there other ones? Let's say, I don't know, something wrong with the liver, and where you would go and then manipulate the tissue around there to what would be an example of that? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, gallbladder is kind of a big one. The gallbladder. So it's a little pouch-like organ that sits underneath your liver on the right side of your ribs. And that's the thing that that stores bile, which helps you digest fat. Right. And there are a lot of people who, when they have a little spasm or they have some gallstones, one of the early interventions is to cut it out. When maybe the tissue quality around the gallbladder just needs to be softened up, or we need to help drain the gallbladder to help it function, to wake it up a little bit.
Okay. So you can do that through the visceral manipulation. You can.
Yeah. And it's all gentle, right? It's not painful. It's not magic. It's understanding fascia and how our hands can influence the tissue quality.
If you get rid of the gallbladder, then what replaces the bile that your body needs?
Well, the bile's made in the liver, so you're still making.
No. What was it? The gallbladder just doles it out. Is that what it was?
It stores bile and it concentrates it to make it a little bit more concentrated as a fat emulsifier. So, people can survive without gallbladders, but it's one of those things I would rather keep than cut out. And sometimes it's necessary to cut to remove it if it's inflamed or maybe it exploded, whatever it might be.
I'm asking this because my stepmom just went through this and she ended up having surgery and had a lot of complications from the surgery. But, again, this information and what you're doing, I don't know how visible or not it is. And it just seems like there are a lot of people that could have just a much easier, better path of, like you said, amplifying the body's innate abilities to solve these problems as opposed to getting surgery.
And the other thing with the surgeries I see a lot, so people who've had, who require surgery, they have a lot of secondary issues from the scar tissue that forms after the surgery. The scar tissue binds up the small intestines. It can cause pain. It can cause restrictions in movement and function. And that's just kind of the reality of anytime you have a surgery, you're going to create some scar tissue. It's almost an absolute, it's going to happen because that's the body's response to injury and threat.
So your podcast, the Awkward Silence, gets into some of the health and wellness stuff, but it's also about just getting past, actually, instead of me interpreting what it's about, why do you tell us?
The awkward silence comes from these transitions in life, right? When I was thinking about where's my life going to go now that I'm laid off, or, I had an engagement that ended. That's another kind of awkward silence. These challenges, these points in life where you're forced to look at what you're doing, where you're going. And health is a part of that. I see a lot of people who are suffering from these health challenges, but we can derive meaning, and we can create something positive out of awkward silence. We can go in a new direction. It's a wake-up call to explore something new, to start a podcast like we are, even if we're scared crapless of putting ourselves out there.
Yeah, imperfect action, right?
Imperfect action. Yeah, and really getting out of our own way. And I share stories from people who've done it, people I look up to, other doctors, people who are running businesses like, Life Float, right?
I wanted to ask you about that because I recently just did a float session. It was last week, and I'm going to be interviewing the gentleman, Jeff Ono, that owns Pause Float here in LA. It was interesting. I probably have to go back and try it again, but do you have any thought on that? I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but since you did interview the Life Float, what are your thoughts, or what did you learn from it?
Well, if I think of like, what is my goal of doing these things, like floating in a tank of Epsom salt, no lights, no sound, what's the whole point of that? It all comes back to, how do I enable my body how do I tap into my body's own healing mechanisms and ability? And one of the ways to do that is to get into this parasympathetic rest and digest state. So it's another tool to get.
Can you say it again 5 times fast?
Rest and digest. Parasympathetic.
Parasympathetic. Okay.
So a lot of our functions in our body, our autonomic nervous system, when we breathe, when our heart keeps going, we're not thinking about it. When you feel stressed out, you can't. It's more difficult to think your way into lowering your heart rate. So what stimulus what environment do you need to create where that might help you balance the autonomic nervous system? One of them, that's what the idea behind floating.
Oh, okay.
Is to put yourself into a place where there's no sound stress, light stress. The feeling of the water changes the state of your body and thus your mind. And we need times for recovery. Life can be stressful, and that's normal. You're not going to avoid all stress. So you need something to balance that out. If we think of a scale, on one side is all the stressors, your work, your life, your kids, finding your purpose, doing all this stuff. You also need to balance that stress with recovery. Just like when you work out, you don't get your gains, you don't grow muscle, you don't get faster during the workout. You get faster when you're resting.
Right.
You heal when you're resting.
Regenerate.
You're improving when you're regenerating. So floating is just kind of one of the ways to improve that rest and recovery and regeneration state.
Okay. And what about that cryo? Was it cryo did you look into that one as well?
Cryo, I haven't tried cryotherapy, which is using like intense cold.
Right.
I talked to a owner of one of the cryo places, and it seems like a pretty interesting.
I want to try it. Just curiosity.
Yeah. From what she was telling me, you get the benefits of the cold without the ill effects of the cold. I prefer. I was talking about using cold water, cold therapy. Yeah, hydrotherapy.
So do you follow Wim Hof and his whole cold thing, the breathing and the cold water thing?
Yeah. I've followed him a bit and know a little bit about that story. And so, he's kind of at the, not extreme, but kind of the exceptional end of using cold therapy. From a therapeutic standpoint, you can use cold therapy. Like after my marathon, my feet were destroyed, and I didn't really have a lot of like tools to deal with it at my Airbnb besides using some cold water, because I know the action of cold water is to decrease pain. In this case, my feet were swollen, so I wanted to reduce the swelling and narrow, constrict my blood vessels instead of expand. So using cold water to help my feet heal naturally, it really helped a lot. So you can do that on different levels, full body, specific areas.
Sense.
And you're training your nervous system and blood vessels, cardiovascular system.
Right. That makes
Another
sense.
tool for that autonomic balance.
So in terms of your podcast, so you do get into some of these wellness type things. How do you focus on the making the change? That awkward silence when you have changes in your life. How do you go after that, or how do you expose that or talk about it?
Yeah, exactly. What I found is that the people who I admire and are doing exceptional things got there because of their awkward silences. So I really try to dig into how they are doing what they're doing today, because that's how I learned to look at challenges differently, to look at sitting in a cubicle as not something like not looking at myself as the victim of some circumstance, but that I can use that experience to spur change. Because there's only two ways you make change. Either you're really inspired to do something, or you feel so shitty. Oh, can I use that word? you feel.
Now I have to put explicit tag. That's all right.
Yeah. Now that if you've hit a rock bottom, those are kind of the two situations where you're going to change your direction. I think the most dangerous place in life is to be right in the middle where you feel comfortable. And it wasn't until I got laid off, I was forced to change, that I actually changed. But now that you know the conditions where you can change, it's like, okay, what can I do proactively? I don't need to go have a traumatizing event to change. I can start that process now by learning from other people's experiences.
So, what are your plans? You had mentioned about your goal for the podcast, trying to reach a million people. So, are you focusing on your, what part are you focusing on? Because the awkward silence is change and personal development, right? And then the stuff that you're into, the naturopathic and all that, is the wellness. I know they're combined. So, do you have any particular main goal for that, or is it just both of those topics and how they are together? Like, how are you trying to change the world, I guess, by reaching a million people? Because that's
a big goal, right?
A lot of people.
Yeah, I've been doing. I started doing this program called Thinking into Results. But it's a Bob. Bob Proctor. This is well, I'm doing one of his programs. I started the first module was all about goal setting, and he was like, there's 3 types of goals. Like, often people set goals like one they know how to do, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to, like, if your goal is to do 10 push-ups, but you already know how to do 10 push-ups, that's a really kind of superficial goal. Like, the second type of goal is you plan, the plan on how to get there, okay, which is often not inspiring because it doesn't seem. It's like, if you know the plan to get there, if it's not big enough, it's not going to stick. And then there's the third type of goal where, it's big. You're able to do it. You're willing to do it, but you don't know exactly the steps to get there. That's the kind of the goal with reaching a million people. It's like, okay, I know I'm able to, I know I'm willing to, it might take me 20 years to do it. But so now it's a matter of just taking that next step. Right. So, through Broadcast Yourself, the course we did together, we have that start. So I can only start, I can just really do that next step. And as a recovering overthinker and perfectionist, I'm accepting that I won't know all the steps to get there. And me trying to know all the steps to get there was really what has held me back.
Well, I've done that too, because when you want to have everything figured out completely before you start, and it's not possible to have everything figured out completely, that means you don't start. That means you don't get anywhere.
Yeah. And then that's when you wake up 10 years from now and you're like, okay, I'm about where I am or where I was 10 years ago. And really, that's kind of the scariest thing for me. So for me, I use the fear of regret as the thing that moves me forward. Everyone's a little different.
Right? Yeah, that's not, so explain that again.
Fear of regret. I won't claim to have thought of this, but I think Jeff Bezos uses the regret minimization framework. He's like, how do I minimize regret in my life? And he operates from that place. So I was like, okay, I want to start this podcast, but will I regret not starting it compared to starting it and maybe failing and not, if it doesn't take off, which would I rather have? The regret of never trying, or trying and maybe not quite getting where I want to go, but knowing that I did everything I could.
Yeah. I don't want to have any big regrets like that. I'm trying to, make up for stuff now of whatever regrets I had. But, getting into your passion is definitely something you do not want to regret.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And that kind of gets back to that quote, if you don't change your direction, you may just end up where you're heading. Which is scary.
Yeah. So we can use fear as a motivation.
Right. Yeah. And that's fine. If it works, whatever works, I guess, for the individual, right? As long as you get yourself moving.
Yeah. As long as that fear is not, as long as you're not using fear as an excuse not to do something, I think,
right.
Then fear is okay. Fear is natural.
So, to kind of wrap things up a little bit, I usually ask guests to define in their mind what a manceptional man would look like. And again, it's a made up word, but
it's a great made up word.
Yeah, it's very catchy. Thanks. What would you consider the attributes of a man who's manceptional? And since I'm using my new kind of subtitle now, do hard work, what types of obstacles or hard work do you have to do to become that manceptional man? Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, my thoughts on being manceptional. Yeah, I guess as I was growing up, I was never like the macho guy or the super athletic guy, and I always thought that seems to be kind of the masculine thing. But over time, I've noticed that kindness, being kind to other people, is a really manceptional quality. Having humility, willingness to learn and grow, having that willingness to do things you're uncomfortable with, and having the kind of that courage to do the work that you need to do, and also not being afraid to put yourself out there.
Right.
Even if you could be judged, even if you can be exposed and be vulnerable, those are, in my mind, manceptional qualities that I'm constantly working on. I wouldn't say that I'm perfect by any means, but those are the ideals that I try to train and improve on every day.
Yeah, I think I like that, because I think the courage aspect, I think, is probably the biggest thing for people to make a change in their lives, whatever it is, whether it's learning a new skill or changing their track or what have you. And that is kind of a manly thing to, you see the environment, you want to do something else, you got to adjust and not be afraid to make that change. And, I guess, I don't know what the phrase would be a man, be manceptional, and get on that track and take action. So,
yeah. And it's like courage, not in the sense of like saving someone from a burning vehicle. I mean, sure, that's courage, sure. But also that, like the quiet courage to stay on your path. Even when everyone else is trying to distract you from it. I think that's the quote I use at the end of my podcast.
Oh, okay.
The biggest challenge in life is staying on your path and knowing your path without being distracted by all the others that try to intersect it.
Yeah, and I have something on my website. I don't know if I posted yet, but I have a manceptional manifesto. But one of the things is that point is that you can't worry about what other people are saying and have that affect your actions. Like, if you're doing the right thing you should be doing, then you might have to cut some of those people out of your life because they're just trying to drag you down into the bucket where they are at the bottom of the bucket. They don't want to see you climb out of the bucket.
Yeah. I've heard it's a crabs in the bucket effect, right? Everyone's trying to like pull you back in from escaping certain death.
Yeah. It's called the crab mentality, where they all want to drag you back down.
Yeah. And often the crabs in the bucket are some of your like people you love and you care about and are closest to you, which makes it so much, it takes that much more courage to stand your ground. Yeah.
Yeah. And they might be doing it just because they're their own fear or whatever, but it doesn't matter. They're still trying to drag you down. And you just can't have that if you're going to be menceptional.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Aron, I really enjoyed this conversation. There's probably a ton of medical and health stuff and, that we could have covered, but I think we got a very interesting take. I think you're onto something that, I bet half the people in the Western societies could be dealing with their health issues and emotional issues and all that stuff with what you're doing. And, hopefully that grows. And otherwise, I think we're killing ourselves with this medication that's just treating the symptoms and just piling on top of everything and causing more problems. So I hope you can reach those million people, not only to change their lives, but also to understand some of the naturopathic stuff that you're doing. And, more power to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate your questions and your research and your curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, everybody, this is again, Dr. Aron Choi. What's the best way for people to follow you? You've got articles on Medium. You've got, webcasts. You got a website. What's the best way for people to follow you and kind of learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, right now I'd say check out the podcast, The Awkward Silence with Dr. Aron Choi on iTunes. Yeah. Medium, you can find me, Aron Choi, ARONCHOI. My website is aronchoi.com, and you can find me there.
Logically enough. Okay.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Good luck. We didn't get to talk about your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I take Krav Maga myself. I've been doing it for about 3 years, and definitely some big challenges there. But so I know a little bit of what you're going through in terms of getting in there and kind of pushing your limits, right?
Yeah. We'll have to speak again. We'll have to do this again, and then I can ask you about Krav Maga.
There you go. Absolutely. So, okay, Dr. Aron Choi, thank you so much. Have a good one and more power to you.
Thanks. You too.
Okay. Take care.